Okay, Mr. Tunde, we can see your screen now. You can go ahead, please. Can you please
Good
unmute your
afternoon, everyone,
speaker? All
and
right.
welcome to CyberRaycon 2021. It's been an interesting session so far, starting from yesterday leading up to today, which is the grand finale. And I've spent some time listening to previous speakers, and I must say it's been very enlightening. This is a one of a kind, I would say, cybersecurity conference. All right, today I'm going to be taking you through the topic privacy, governance, and security management at the enterprise level. Once again, I'm Larry Olatunde, and it's a pleasure to be doing this presentation to all of you. All right, so for today's outline, I have four sections, from section 0 to section 3, and we'll be looking at cybersecurity statistics and privacy facts. Then we're going to data privacy and data security. And then we'll also look into some privacy myths and privacy risks. And then we'll wrap up with privacy governance and privacy controls. Now, let's look at cybersecurity statistics and privacy facts. Now, let's look at 10 world cybersecurity statistics in 2021. Now, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has rampaged the world since the end of 2019 through 2020, and we're still feeling the effect of 2021, cybercrime has gone up by 600% due to the pandemic. And the other thing that has also gone up due to the pandemic is remote working. And by some statistics done from some research, we found out that the average cost of a data breach has increased to $137,000 as a result of remote working. Now, 43% of cyber attacks target small businesses. So, for those of us that think that only large organizations are the major victims of cyber attacks, you might want to think twice about that. Now, 95% of cybersecurity breaches are as a result of human error, and 94% of malware is delivered via email. Now, let's go into some privacy facts. Now, many users assume that the internet is basically fair and safe to use, and that most websites have what we call transparent data policies. But that's not always true. It's also important to know that 91% of cyber attacks are launched through phishing emails. And it's very good to also mention at this point that Microsoft Office files that you receive either via removable storage or via file attachment for an email should not always be trusted. And online users are worried about their emails being read by unauthorized users, and almost 34% have started using secure email providers and other encrypted technologies like VPNs. Recent estimates also suggest that 41% of children aged between 8 and 17 have public profiles online. The next section I have here is data privacy and data security. I'll be spending a few minutes. Now, let's discuss privacy. There's been a misconception about privacy that confuses many people. People tend to share seemingly related personal information online, such as birthdays, addresses, contact details, marriage, holiday plans, all of this on social media. And people are also inclined to share pictures of their favorite foods, people, localities, and workplaces, in addition to providing opinions on sensitive issues, be it religious, national, or political issues, throughout different social media platforms. On the other hand, there are new and exciting technologies that are emerging almost on a daily basis, and people share their information in the guise of maybe playing games online, attending virtual worlds, and doing shopping online. Similarly, organizations also collect and store relevant personal information for business purposes, and consequently, the privacy risk increases ubiquitously with every share. The shared data, individually or collectively, can be used for malicious activities. Now, before moving ahead, let's have a clear understanding of privacy and related terminologies. Now, there are various privacy definitions that you come across online, like the one you have displayed on the screen right now, where, according to Wikipedia, privacy is defined as the ability of individuals or groups of people to seclude themselves or information about themselves and thereby express themselves selectively. In other words, privacy is an individual's fundamental right to have control over the collection, usage, and dissemination of personally identifiable information. But let's look into other definitions, and then you see that data privacy or information privacy is concerned with proper handling, processing, storage, and usage of personal information. It's all about the rights of individuals with respect to their personal information. And privacy in general is an individual's right to freedom, freedom from intrusion, prying eyes, or the rights of the person to be left alone. Another source also says that privacy is the ability of an individual or group to seclude themselves or information about themselves and thereby express themselves selectively. And that's the same one I read from Wikipedia one more time. So, personally identifiable information for a number of us who might be new in terms of data privacy. Personally identifiable information is information that directly or indirectly identifies an individual. For instance, names, addresses, date and place of birth, national identity number, biometric information, for example, your photo or your fingerprint or your iris, which can be used for an iris scan. So data privacy, which is a slightly different, has a slightly different definition from what privacy is. It sometimes can be referred to as information privacy, and is actually the technical aspect of information security or cybersecurity that deals with the ability of an organization to handle PII, or an individual's rights to determine what kind of data can be collected, stored in a computer system, and can be shared with third parties. Now let's look at data privacy and data security and how they relate to each other. Now, people and organizations are sometimes confused by the differences between data privacy and data security. Both of them pertain to personally identifiable information, PII, but they are also distinct concepts. Because data privacy is about the control that's related to usage and governance over personally identifiable information, such as policies and procedures being established to ensure that PII is collected, stored, used, and shared appropriately. While data security is about ensuring that technical controls relating to confidentiality, integrity, and availability are implemented to protect PII from malicious cyber attacks. So, in other words, data security is a technical aspect of a PII, whereas data privacy is a legal aspect. In layman terms, privacy is the fundamental right to be left alone without any intervention. Now, although data security and data privacy look similar, they are quite different from each other. All right. So, data privacy or data security rather deals with the protection of data from cyber criminals, while data privacy deals with how data organizations or individuals legally gather, store, and use data. According to TechTarget, a popular online forum, data security and privacy are part of information technology, dealing with an organization or individual's ability to determine the data in a system that can be shared with third parties. And furthermore, it helps organizations protect data in the office and in the employees' hands while reducing the vulnerabilities that hackers can exploit. Now, why is data security and privacy important? There are a lot of reasons why data security and privacy are important for organizations, and some of them are it helps reduce the number of data breaches that an organization can suffer from. And it also helps prevent loss of revenue. It helps protect customers' privacy and for maintaining and improving brand value. It also supports an organization's code of ethics, and it gives competitive advantage over other businesses. Data security and data privacy are strongly interconnected, but not the same. Knowing the differences is important for better understanding how they work and what they each mean to your business. Consider a scenario where you've gone to great lengths to secure personally identifiable information, PII. The data is encrypted, access is restricted, and multiple overlapping monitoring systems are in place. And however, if that PII was collected without proper consent, you could be violating a data privacy regulation, even though that data is in your possession and is secure. Right? So that's exactly how data privacy and data security relate to each other. In this section, I'll be taking you through some privacy myths and some risks. Now, some of the privacy myths I'll touch on here is information leak prevention is the security administrator's problem. That's a myth because information leak prevention is a responsibility of everyone in the organization. And a lot of people believe that if they block instant messaging, web-based email, and external storage devices, they don't need to worry about information leaks. And this is also a privacy myth. And you also see scenarios where they say only regulated industries need information leak prevention technology. And that's also a myth. And I would like to also mention this one, which says that my employees understand what they can and they can't send out of the company. You'll be surprised that most of your employees do not know what they can and they can't send out of their organization. Going into privacy risks, which I have about 10 of them here, which I've curated from the OWASP top 10 privacy risks. OWASP is short or an acronym for Open Web Application Security Project, and they are popularly known for releasing the OWASP top 10 annually. Well, what they have listed as the top 10 privacy risks are what I have displayed here on the slide in front of you. And one of the biggest challenges faced by any organization is managing privacy risks. Since privacy awareness has increased over time, people are becoming more concerned with how organizations are handling their personal information. Moreover, with the inception of privacy regulatory laws and associated penalties, it has become mandatory for organizations to take necessary steps in establishing and implementing a strong privacy risk management framework. Inadequate or the lack of a risk management framework may present numerous organizational risks, such as possible damage to the organization's public image and reputation, and then potential financial and operational losses, regulatory sanctions and penalties or fines, and the loss of customers' trust and failure to attract customers. And finally, it may also lead to damaged business relationships. But now let's go into these top 10 privacy risks according to the Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP. Now, for web application vulnerabilities, vulnerability is a key problem in any system that guards or operates on sensitive user data, right? So failure to suitably design and implement an application, detect a problem, or promptly apply a fix, what you also call a patch, is likely to result in a privacy breach. This risk also encompasses the OWASP top 10 list of web application vulnerabilities, which I mentioned earlier, and the risks that result from them. Now, let's look at operator-sided data leakage. Now, this is the failure to prevent the leakage of any information containing or related to user data or the data itself to any unauthorized party, right? This is actually resulting in loss of data confidentiality introduced either due to intentional malicious breach or unintentional mistake that's maybe, for example, caused by insufficient access management controls or insecure storage or perhaps duplication of data or a lack of awareness. All right. Now let's look at insufficient data breach response. Not informing the affected persons, who we refer to as data subjects, about a possible breach or data leak, resulting either from intentional or unintentional events. Essentially, failure to remedy the situation by fixing the cause and not attempting to limit the leaks is also considered a privacy risk. Now, many organizations usually do this as consent on everything, and it's a huge privacy risk when you apply consent on everything. This is because most times organizations do not want to deal with individual privacy clauses, but they just want to have a blanket consent, obtaining a blanket consent from the data subjects on data privacy. Now, when we look at consent on everything, insufficient deletion of personal data. Now, aggregation or what I call inappropriate use of consent to legitimate processing, and consent is on everything and not collected separately for each purpose, right? That's e.g. Use of website and profiling for advertising, non-transparent policies, terms and conditions. All these actually constitute what we call privacy risks. So now let's also look into non-transparent policies, terms and conditions. So a number of organizations also do not have what we call transparent policies or terms and conditions. and this is also considered as a privacy risk. And we also have the part of insufficient deletion of user data. So failure to effectively and or timely delete personal data after termination of the specified purpose or upon request. This is also going to result in a huge privacy risk. And then we also have privacy risks around insufficient data quality, which basically speaks to the use of outdated or incorrect or bogus user data, and also missing an insufficient session expiration, which is basically failure to effectively enforce session termination. So session termination could be related to you if you're using an application or your system and you experience 5 minutes of inactivity, the system should automatically log you out or ask you to re-authenticate. But if your application does not have that feature, then it can pose a huge privacy risk. Now, inability of users to access and modify their data is also considered as a privacy risk. So users that do not have access to or the ability to change or delete data related to them may not also be in our best interest. And then finally, collection of data not required for the user consented purpose would also represent a privacy risk because, collecting descriptive demographic or any other user-related data that are not needed for the purposes of the system applies also to data for which the user did not provide consent. And now we are here, the final section of today, where we'll be looking at privacy governance and control. Now, what are these privacy governance practices and controls that can help us to manage privacy risks? Okay, so I'm just going to be taking us through what I would say 9 recommended good privacy governance practices, and starting off with informing you that digital records of PII demand unique forms of protection at each part of their life cycle, and it is paramount for an organization to implement effective privacy programs that includes the following good governance and controls in order to access or to address the privacy risks that you have here that we discussed earlier. Okay, so the first part we'll be looking at is privacy governance. And the first part of privacy governance is to have a formal corporate governance structure to determine the level of privacy risk appetite acceptable for senior management. Number 2, you also want to have a privacy framework containing policies and procedures relating to privacy of personal information to address data classification, record management, retention, and destruction. 3, you want to also ensure that you have a privacy risk management framework which will be developed to identify, analyze, and evaluate, and also treat privacy risks. You also want to ensure that you have defined the roles, responsibilities, and accountability related to the privacy program during its life cycle. Now, let's look into data collection. And basically, we want to document the business purposes for collecting personal information to ensure that PII, which are not required, are not collected and retained. Now, 6, identify what kind of PII the organization is required to collect, who will collect that information, how it should be collected, and who will define what is personal or private. Now, let's look into permissions. And first, you have to be well aware about where all personal information is stored and who has access to them. And we also implement a technical solution to set different permission levels for employees based on what PII they need to access, such as public, private, and restricted access. And then if you look at data confidentiality, which is number 4 on the screen, data confidentiality assurance, you want to ensure that PII is encrypted at rest and in motion, and also throughout the life cycle. PII should be encrypted at various levels, whether it's database level or network level or system platform level or application layers, and even business process or functional levels. You also want to identify the disclosure rules of PII to relevant third parties and not disclose to unauthorized entities, that's people and systems. Now, data governance and education. You want to ensure that you define an awareness program to provide employees the privacy awareness training and have guidance on their specific responsibilities in handling privacy requirements, issues, and concerns. Employees who handle or have access to personal information must have undergone the required training, and you want to ensure that skilled resources are available to develop, implement, and maintain an effective privacy program. Now, privacy compliance monitoring framework. You want to establish a compliance monitoring framework to periodically verify the compliance level to ensure that privacy policies and procedures are being followed and detailed enough to meet new or current requirements. You also want to ensure that you perform an assessment of privacy laws and regulations currently applicable for the organization, or which one will be applicable in the future. Now, we also want to ensure that you have in place a privacy incident response plan. Basically, you want to develop a privacy incident response plan in the event of a breach or attempted breaches or of personal information, and to report such breaches to the authorized individuals or regulators or anyone who have been affected by a data breach. This includes breaches that occur on the part of third parties. Now, we also have what we call the data flow map, which is basically a document or map that covers what kind of information is subject to transfer from one location to another, such as between departments, between individuals, to and from third parties, and also through geographical borders. We also want to ensure that you have privacy telecom solutions, which are basically software or system or technology to be used for privacy. And this should be fully evaluated and secured before deployment. You want to consider deploying even hyperautomation to automatically redact PII from both static files and audio video recordings when necessary. So what are the key benefits of good privacy governance and controls? And I'll outline some of these key benefits below. So protecting the organization's image and reputation, protecting valuable data of the organization and its customers, employees, and business partners, achieving a competitive advantage in the marketplace, right? Complying with applicable privacy laws and regulations, and avoiding regulatory penalties, enhancing an organization's credibility, and also promoting confidence, right? So protecting privacy cannot be separated from technological development. And these days, organizations are inclined to invest in security technology to reduce the risk of privacy exposure. However, there is no technology that will prevent and eliminate the risk of every data privacy breach. So organizations should fully understand the nature of risk and take a layered approach to improve their security posture, especially by taking the time to understand PII and reevaluate how the privacy data can be managed and protected. So now let's go into the next slide, where we'll be discussing the technical controls that you can put in place to help address the various privacy risks. And this would be an offshoot of the privacy technical solutions, which we just. So now, privacy controls. You'd see a number that I have here. We have about 10 of them. And the first one is identity and access management. Now, having the proper IDAM controls in place will help limit access to personal data for unauthorized employees. The two key principles in IDAM is separation of duties and least privilege. To help ensure that employees have access only to information or systems applicable to their job function. How does this affect GDPR or NDPR? Right? What does this mean in terms of data protection regulation? Only those who need to access personal information to perform their job have access. And in this situation, privacy training should be available to those individuals to ensure that the intended purpose for the collection of personal data, all right, is maintained. Now, we also have a second privacy control here, which is DLP, data loss prevention, which many of us might be familiar with. And it's also very relevant to data protection regulation, as DLP helps prevent the loss of personal data. It provides technical safeguards such as DLP2 that are critical in preventing a breach and becoming the next headline. So according to data protection regulations and organizations, whether they are the controller or processor of personal information, they are held liable for the loss of any personal data that they collect. Incorporating DLP controls adds a layer of protection by restricting the transmission of personal data outside the network. And then we also have encryption and pseudonymization. Pseudonymization is a difficult word to spell and an even more difficult one to pronounce. However, pseudonymization is the process of personal data, is a processing of personal data in such a way that the data can no longer be attributed to a specific data subject without the use of additional information. Now, this fancy hard to say word may include field level encryption in databases, encryption of entire data stores at rest, as well as encryption of data in use and in transit. So pseudonymization is something that the data protection regulation advises but doesn't require. However, if an incident leading to a security breach occurs, investigators will consider if the organization responsible for the breach has implemented these types of data protection regulation technical controls and technologies. Now, back to the incident response plan again. A mature incident response plan should address phases such as preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. But what if an incident occurs and it was identified that personal data may have been breached? There are data protection regulation technical requirements for your organization's incident response, and these breach notification requirements are among the most notable in the legislation under the data protection regulation. In the event of a potential data breach that involves personal information, an organization must notify the data protection authority without undue delay within 72 hours if feasible, and after becoming aware of the breach, and communicate high risk breaches to affected data subjects without undue delay. Now let's look at third-party risk management. If an organization entrusts the processing of personal data to a processor or sub-processor and a breach occurs, who is liable? Quick answer is liability for all processors are bound by their controllers, instructions. However, data protection regulations, data compliance also obligates processors to have an active role in the protection of personal data. So regardless of instructions from the controller, the processor or personal data must follow data protection regulation and can be liable for any incident associated with the loss of unauthorized access to personal data. So sub-processors also will need to comply with the data protection regulation based on each contractual relationship established between a processor and sub-processor. As you can see, data protection regulation, cybersecurity compliance is just as important for third-party relationships as it is internally for an organization, as long as those third-party processes store or transmit personal data of concerned data subjects. Now, we also have policy management. So while this is the last concept covered here, it's my personal favorite, right? And policy is the teeth, the hammer, and an accountability partner for the previously discussed data security controls. To be effective, policy must receive enterprise-wide buy-in in order to manage and update data security controls in an always changing cybersecurity environment. So for best practices, organizational policy acknowledgement and training ensures policies are properly communicated and understood. Now, know your data. It is essential to know what information is being collected, how it is being used, and whether it is being sold to or shared with third parties. Since different types of PII and their combinations are not equal in their value, and some types of personal data become sensitive in certain contexts, you need to classify your data using a quality data discovery and classification solution. Now, you also ensure that you get control over your data stores and backups. Make sure you don't keep personal data without a defined purpose. Develop retention policies and minimize personal data according to its value and risk. Safeguard against unauthorized access. Implement and strictly maintain the least privilege principle to ensure that users can access only the data that they need to do their jobs, and monitor your systems for suspicious access attempts. So devices, computers, and network drives should have adequate security controls in place, such as access controls, encryption and antivirus software, and the likes. Finally, manage and control risk. Data privacy protection needs to include a regular risk assessment. Instead of building a framework from scratch, you can adopt a commonly used one, such as the NIST Risk Assessment Framework documented in the special publication SP 830. Now, this brings us to the end of today's session on privacy governance and security management and the enterprise. I hope you had a great time. I hope you're able to learn a thing or two, and I look forward to speaking to you again sometime soon. Thank you very much, anyone. At this point, I'll take a bow. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Lanre. We really appreciate you for that session. That was a powerful one. Okay, right about now, before we move to our next presentation, Mr. Larry, please, I would like you, there is somebody, our Chief Executive Officer has a question for you. Okay, so over to you, sir. Mr. Sylvester, over to you.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir. Go ahead with your
Yes,
question.
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Larry. There is an issue that I want you to help us to clarify based on certain things and based on what some people have been getting involved, most especially on data privacy. You know, there is those company that always borrowing money that they always require people access to their contacts. You know, what is your advice to this set of people when it comes to data privacy? Because we realize most times, you know, they call all the contacts on that particular, by the time that individual accepts to let them have access to their contact, you know, you see different text message, different calling, is most especially they keep on bombarding those that didn't know anything about the loan, and they will keep bombard them with messages. So in that case, what do you think we can do at that instance?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So, all right. So, first of all, I mean, going by the contents of the data protection regulation and also looking at from a data privacy point of view, these loan companies that actually gain access to contacts or what I would call personal information of their customers are actually in breach of the data protection regulation simply because the data that they're procuring has nothing in relation to the transaction they're having with that particular customer. So essentially, most times, I mean, data protection is more focused on the organization than on individuals. And how do I mean here? So the same way the data protection regulation would apply to organizations that store customer data, the data protection regulation does not say much on in terms of individuals that store personal data. So in the case that you gain those loan companies gain access to the contacts personal information of other data subjects that are not related to that particular transaction, especially for the fact that they didn't get their consent or permission, then absolutely they are consistently in violation of that. And I think very recently, NICDA has been campaigning or probably released some media article or publication concerning this. So essentially, it's very bad practice from those organizations, because I'm very familiar with this. They go ahead to reach out to contacts of the defaulters to more or less like broadcast. It's almost like a form of social shaming to say that this person is owing a loan, blah, blah, blah. Can you help reach out? So it's a violation of data privacy, and it's a violation of data protection regulation.
Thank you, sir. So can we say now they have the breach of contract, or what can you say about that?
So it may not be a breach of contract from the perspective of between the customer and the organization. Reason being that for most of the organizations, before they can gain access to your contacts, is actually explicitly seek your permission. You may not even be able to use their app without granting that particular permission. However, sometimes they also hide this within the terms and conditions which the customer has actually signed under to actually for them to actually reach out. So I mean, a lot of people do not actually go ahead to read terms and conditions in terms of what the organization will do and not do. So in two scenarios, in a scenario where the loan company did not disclose that, it's definitely a breach of contract. But in a scenario where the loan company has actually included that in their terms and conditions, then absolutely they are not in a breach of contract. But not being in a breach of contract does not guarantee or constitutes that you are not in a breach of data privacy.
Thank you very much, sir. I really commend that. So maybe back to Mr. Sir, so you can go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that question. Really appreciate. Okay. Right now.
Thank you.